Welcome to the Love Intervention. I'm Pastor Evans.
I'm Mrs. Evans.
And if you haven't joined us before, the Love Intervention is a Christian perspective on dating, courtship, and marriage. Now, neither one of us, my wife nor myself, are licensed therapists, but we've had almost 20 years of marriage and several conversations and sessions with different couples that allow us to have some perspective to give you some tips and snips.
Tips and snips.
On what would be helpful for your relationships. Now today, we're talking about cohabitation.
Cohabitation.
Living together outside of marriage. So, let's get into the topic. Let's go.
So today we're talking about living single together.
We are living single.
Hey, it's a 2019 kind of world.
Glad I
Got my girl. No, I'm not sure about that. But while I was reading and doing some research, I came across a really great resource. And it is from Biblical Counseling Coalition. It's the dangerous lure of living together before marriage. And the quote that I would like to share is, pastors hint that they disapprove of couples living together during premarital counseling, but they still joyfully officiate their weddings. Small group leaders know they should confront their cohabitating members, but they turn a blind eye because they feel they lack the relational capital needed to address such a personal issue. Mature Christian friends and family members, even godly parents, don't want to rock relational boats, so they sweep their loved ones' sinful lifestyles under the rug. So then, our question today is, what do we believe about couples who live together before marriage or cohabitating before marriage?
That's our question of the day. If you want to answer that question, or if you have some comments regarding that, leave it in the comments and we'll try to get back to you about that. Should be an interesting conversation. So I'm sure you have a definition of cohabitation for us, wife.
Yes, I do. So what is it? Cohabitation is living with a member of the opposite sex in an intimate relationship outside of marriage.
Living with somebody outside of marriage.
And I got that definition from Christianity Today, what intimate cohabitation means for ministry.
Right. So I have some thoughts on just cohabitation in general that I'm going to share at this time, right? So the first thing I thought about when we're getting ready to do this topic and getting ready to do this particular episode is that cohabitation is like, it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's cheating. It's cheating. You're trying to do something that you don't have permission to do yet. Some things are supposed to be left until after you get married. Some experiences are supposed to be had till after you get married. Married. And living together is one of those things, right? I saw a quote in one of the articles we were reading that said, living together sucks the joy and novelty out of the first parts of marriage, right? Because one of the coolest things about getting married and moving in with someone is this is the first time you're doing it. But if you cohabitate outside of marriage, if you try and do it that way, it sucks that little bit out of it, that joy out of it, that you feel and that you experience when you're like, oh, I can't wait to live with my wife, or I can't wait to live with my husband, right?
Right. Right. And when I was reading further in the article or the resource, the Biblical Counseling Coalition, they had a really great quote that I wanted to share. It says, our society cherishes trying before buying, convenience at any cost, sex without rules, companionship without commitment, and relationships without responsibility. Everything premarital cohabitation provides.
That is a good quote. That is a good quote. And in our conversations and in just kind of our relationships with different people, we found that even Christians feel like doing a what do you call it, a test run marriage cohabitation. A test run marriage is something that is valuable to find out if this is the one that God has sent you.
Right.
So it's interesting to me that people, if we're talking, remember we come from a Christian perspective on our show. It's interesting that folks who believe the way we believe would think that doing something outside of what God would have you do is a good way to figure out what God would have you do.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you know, this is all of that is so true. Mm-hmm. We find ourselves a lot of the times wanting to try everything before we make a commitment, right? We want to try food. We want the 14-day free trial. We want we want to test stuff out, you know, colors, shoes, clothes before we purchase them. And this happens with a lot of couples. We want to engage in marriage behavior and get the privilege and the benefits that only marriage can afford you.
Right. Yeah, you can't test drive everything.
Right.
Right. And I like to test drive cars. I'll go test drive a car I have no intention of buying. So I think sometimes people will test drive relationships they have no intention of staying in. Because why stay in it if there's no commitment?
Or you don't see a benefit in it.
Right.
And you just want to do that for a minute.
Mm-hmm. Or two.
Well, maybe
5.
Maybe.
So although people obviously think cohabitation, living together outside of marriage, has some benefits, there has to be some drawbacks. What are some of those drawbacks? That's what we want to talk about right now.
So while I was reading, I came across an article in Crosswalk, The Long-Term Consequences of Cohabitation. And they stated that the false truths in society, number one, is that you can gauge whether or not your marriage will be successful based on a false compatibility. Thus, some argue that since divorce is a reality, right? It makes sense to measure compatibility. And what better way to discover compatibility than to do a trial run at marriage? You can't trial run marriage.
Right.
Compatibility is not the main reason for marriage, and this relationship is meant to be a safe space where couples learn when to compromise and when to concede.
Right.
Those are my thoughts.
Those are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if marriage is supposed to be a safe place where you learn how to compromise and concede, because concession is a part of a healthy marriage. You're not always going to agree on things,
right?
But you learn how to compromise in certain areas. You learn how to, like, okay, let's just do it your way this time, or we'll do it my way next time. And those are safe places. The only safe place to do that really is in marriage, because you have the safety and security of the fact that the person that you're with is committed to you long term. There's no, the fact that you're trying it means that there's no commitment.
Right.
Right.
And that you don't believe that it's a safe space. You're trying to find out if it is.
Right. Because the best trials only last about 3 months. Right?
Right.
You get 90 days and see if it's going to work out.
Right.
Right? But that's not how you do marriage. You know, the problem is with living together outside of marriage is we put practicality above purity. Mm-hmm. We think that it's a good idea to do these trial test runs because we love each other, right? And we are moving towards marriage. So the next logical step is to live together, and we can save money, and we can figure out if we can actually live together. I can figure out what you like and don't like. Mm-hmm. We put practicality over the purity of learning all those things at the first part of your marriage. It makes perfect sense to do it, mm-hmm. like perfect human sense to do it. Like you move in and figure it out, but it hurts our spiritual selves. It hurts our progress, and it will eventually hurt your marriage going forward. Yeah.
Right. And so in the article, it went on to say another false truth in society, which is number 2, mm-hmm. is that living together before marriage is a way to test a couple's commitment towards each other. Cohabitation has all the powerful elements that make up intimacy, but lacks one major ingredient.
What's that?
Commitment. Commitment is the fence that protects, the lock that guarantees, and the alarm system that ensures that vulnerability is not easily compromised. Marriage is a covenant of mutual protection, devotion, sacrifice, and love.
Wow. I like the imagery that they used in the article of commitment being that protection. When we talked a little bit ago about the safety of being vulnerable in marriage, because you know that the person that you're with is committed to being with you, and that safety that commitment brings in marriage. I like the imagery that the article used. One of the other things I want to say, one of the last things that I wanted to say with regard to living together is that we feel like the person that we're living with when we're cohabitating or living together or shacking up, like the church people say, is the person that you're going to end up being married to.
Right.
But that's just not the case. Because, like you were saying in the article, the commitment is what brings the security and the safety for you to be yourself. Cohabitation has embedded in it fear and insecurity.
Right. Because you're always questioning.
Right. And both people know that it's just we're just kind of doing this. And as much as you say, oh yeah, we're really committed, that's why we're living together. Both of you know you can walk away at some point.
Right.
Because when the conversation that comes in when you're renting an apartment or leasing an apartment, whose name is on the lease? Right? Are both our names going to be on the lease? Whose name are the bills going in?
Right.
Whose responsibility is it for paying those bills?
Are we going to renew the lease?
Are we renewing the lease?
Or am I just going to leave you there and not renew?
Right.
And then you're like,
right.
What happened?
What happened? Right. So even though people think that it's the next best step, embedded in that is fear and insecurity.
Right.
And you don't get the safety of marriage with cohabitation, which is why it becomes challenging and difficult to engage in it. One of the other things that always comes up when I talk to folks or when we talk to people about how their marriage is after they live together, and they'll say stuff like, oh, it's just like it was before.
Right.
Just like it was before. Or when you talk to people that are already living together and they're looking forward to their marriage, looking forward to getting married, the excitement about living together after the marriage is usually gone.
Right.
One of the articles said it's just another Tuesday. Like you get married on one day and the next day is just another day because you cheated yourself out of the experience of living with your spouse after you become married, after you have the commitment, right?
Yeah, and one of the negative things that arises from that is because marriage is different from just being in a relationship with someone. So when they get married and they expect for their Tuesday to be regular, but then they find out that the Tuesday is regular, but everything else has changed.
Right.
And so now it's like, what happened? This didn't happen before we got married, but accordingly, it's going to be different. But they expect it to be the regular old Tuesday because that was the reason for moving in. But what happens is that things mean different. Things are different. If mean different things when you're married.
Right. The weight is different.
Right.
The responsibility is different, particularly with Christian couples. If we're talking about just having an understanding of how God sees marriage, and we talked about this before. God sees marriage as the ultimate example of His love to the world. So your responsibility in your marriage becomes to show God's love.
Right.
And there's no way that you can do that without some type of ramification, some type of struggle, some type of challenge is what the word I'm
right, because you open yourself up to attacks. And so it has to be different because we as Christians receive attacks from things of this world, and we're not of this world.
Right.
So we get attacked from the things of this world, from the ruler of this world.
And the last thing that I want to say about cohabitation is that it brings divorce front and center in your pre-marriage and in your marriage.
Right.
Because you had some thoughts about whether or not this was the person that you want to stay with, this, which is why you want to do the trial run, right? So because that divorce is an option, it puts you at a disadvantage going into your marriage from the get-go.
Right, because you go into it thinking, let's do this trial run so that we don't get divorced.
Right.
When divorce shouldn't even enter the conversation.
Yeah. Remember we were at the church not too long ago, and the pastor was talking about there's no way that you're not going to sin by thinking constantly, I'm not going to sin.
Right.
Like you wake up, I'm not going to get divorced. I'm not going to get divorced. I'm not going to get divorced. I'm not going to get divorced.
Right.
Divorce is at the front part of your mind.
Right.
So if you're constantly thinking, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, then you're going to end up doing it because that's what's there.
Right, because you're concentrating on the wrong thing. You should be focusing on Christ.
Right.
And not even concerned about whether or not anything will happen or won't happen. Because if you focus on Christ, all other things fall into place.
Right. Because then it doesn't even come up in conversation. When we have disagreements or we have times when I'm being annoying.
Right.
Divorce never comes up because it's not an option. We're not talking about, I'm just going to leave you. That doesn't happen.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, so that doesn't happen. So if you want your marriage to be successful, then you take that off the table. And it has to be off the table. You can't just bring it up. So.
Right. Right. And so my last thought is true commitment within a physically intimate relationship is not possible outside of marriage. Those are my thoughts.
That's your thought? That's a good way to end. I like it.
You like it?
I like it.
So then, what does God say? What does God have to say to us?
Right. So there's only two quick scriptures today on that I believe relates to our topic. The first one is in Ephesians 5, verses 1 through 6. We're not reading all of those verses, but I would encourage you to go and read them. But verse 1 says, therefore be imitators of God as beloved children. Verse 2, and walk in love just as Christ also loved. Verse 6 says, let no one deceive you with empty words. The reason that we get involved in these cohabitation situations is because people, society, images, celebrities, whoever you want to say, convince us that this is the way to figure out whether or not this is the person you're supposed to be with. But verse 1 here says, be imitators of God. Do what God would have you do. And God says, get married first, then live together.
Right.
Then you get that safety and security that we were talking about. The second scripture is one that most people are familiar with. Maybe even if you haven't been in church, it's the one that's usually called the woman at the well.
Okay.
We find out that this woman is actually in a cohabitation, living together situation when Jesus says to her, listen, I can give you what you actually need. She asks him to give it, and he tells her, your situation is hindering you getting what you need right now.
Right.
So that's in John 4, 15 through 19. Go back and read through that. But Jesus deals directly with her cohabitation or her living together situation, the mistake that she's making, and saying, listen, you need to clean this up so that you can get the best out of what I have for you. Right. And I think that's the message that God has given us in for this particular episode is make the best choices. Do what I've shown you how to do. I've created marriage for you. It is the best thing for you if you want to be in a living together situation. So do it that way, and you'll get the things that you need. So today we talked about living together, cohabitation, or as the church folks say it, shacking up.
Living together, single.
Right. Living single together. That's what we went with.
Oh.
Yeah. See, you messing people up. Living single together was our topic today. All right. So it's been a pleasure having you with us. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel so that you can get all of our episodes and hit the notification bell so you'll know when the next one is released.
Right. Is that the end?
Yes.
See you next time.